All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kat Martins, and I am DWDC's program specialist. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues Amanda Coventry-Berridge and Kelsey Goforth. Before we begin today, I want to acknowledge that while we are meeting virtually, the land that Dying with Dignity Canada is on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We invite you and encourage you to do your own research regarding the various treaties, in particular the land in which you're on while meeting with us today. I am thrilled to welcome you today. Through our webinars, we aim to provide you with information and key takeaways, as well as create a space for conversation on end-of-life topics alongside the professionals that know it best. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Before I welcome today's speakers, I'd like to go over a few things. Everyone on the call today is going to be muted. However, there will be opportunities to submit questions. To do so, please type your questions into the question bar on the Zoom side panel, and we will read it out for you at the end of this webinar. Please try to keep your question as concise as clear as possible. While we are going to try to get as many audience questions as possible, unfortunately, we may not get to everybody's. If you have any outstanding questions or questions that are personal in nature, please email us at support@dyingwithdignity.ca, and we will follow up with you. This session will be recorded. There will be a post-webinar survey that will pop up on your screen after the webinar and will give you the opportunity to share your feedback. And last but not least, I'd like to take a moment to spotlight an upcoming special project that will be premiering on World Right to Die Day this November 2nd. In My Own Time is a documentary that looks at what it means to die on one's own terms. Using first-hand accounts from people across Canada, this film will offer perspectives on medical assistance in dying that's made, less commonly seen in media reports, and present on opportunity to educate people on end-of-life choice in Canada. On November 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern, Dying with Dignity Canada will be hosting the premiere of In My Own Time at Scotiabank Theatre in downtown Toronto. Other screenings will be taking place across Canada throughout the month of November. So be sure to follow us on social media for the updates. We hope you can join us. And now to introduce today's speakers. Amy Fishley is the Director of Programs and Services for Pancreatic Cancer Canada. Amy joined Pancreatic Cancer Canada, or otherwise known as PCC, in 2022 after nearly 2 decades working in public health, where she focused on research, community engagement, policy development, and advocacy. As the Director of Programs and Services with PCC, Amy oversees the patient support programs where she has the privilege of connecting with people who are impacted by this devastating disease. An important part of Amy's role is supporting the community involves collaborating with like-minded organizations to advocate and ensure access to vital resources and services. Scott Patterson is a center manager for Wellspring, Alberta's Karma House, and a registered nurse. Scott has worked in Canada, the United States, and Scotland before returning to Vancouver to pursue his degree in nursing. During his time at the Lionsgate Hospital, he worked in orthopedics, neurology, emergency, and general medicine. Scott's tireless devotion to promoting empathy and dignity in end-of-life care made him a perfect fit to join Wellspring, Alberta. Thank you so much to our panel for joining us today. I will now pass it over to Amanda to get us started with the interview.
Thank you so much, Kat. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much to our panel for joining us today. So let's jump right into it. I have questions for both of you, so maybe we'll start first with Scott, if you could answer my first question, which is, can you tell me a little bit about your career path and why you chose to work specifically with organizations that support those with cancer?
No, thanks, Amanda, and thank you for the warm welcome. Much appreciated. Yeah, I'm joining you from Calgary today in Alberta, also known as Mohkinstsis. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and that's in the language of the Blackfoot. So Oki is welcome. So welcome to everybody. Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of it was just covered my career path there. But I specializing in a lot of things where my heart always lied was hospice and palliative. It's a unique part of nursing where you get to care for not only the patient, but I would say equally as much you're supporting their loved ones, their family, and helping them through a natural stage of progression. It's a natural stage of progression. So when one passes on. And I did obtain my nursing in Vancouver, like that was shared. And but I always found and I always believed whether one's passing or whether one's healing or through chronic diseases, much like cancer, there's a lot more to healing, not only for that impacted, but their family and their loved ones than beyond medical. I'm a huge believer there's a lot more to healing than beyond medicine and medical. And that's where Wellspring comes in. They provide so many programs that supports all the members within Wellspring with emotional, social, and practical needs.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Scott. We tried to sort of tie together your many accomplishments into sort of a tidy little sum for our audience, but I hope we didn't zoom too fast through your qualification. So thank you so much for sharing that. And Amy, exact same question. Can you tell me a little bit about your career path and why you chose specifically to work with an organization like PCC to support those with cancer?
Sure. Similar to Scott, I'm like, okay, there's a little bit, you got a little bit of a snapshot, but yeah, specifically around PCC. So I did work for public health close to 2 decades. And actually I worked in chronic disease and injury prevention, specifically in substance use prevention. So one wonders, how did you go from here to here? But you know what? I loved working with the community and I loved engaging with people with lived experience. Those were the things I really enjoyed about the job. That was my most valuable. But I think moving forward, I was like, I really want to change. I want to make impact at a larger level because a lot of the advocacy work I did was very local. So enter Pancreatic Cancer Canada, and mega props to Kat for already shortening it for me so I could say PCC. I appreciate that. It was a natural fit from the start. I got to marry my loves of advocacy and working with community, but also getting to work with this dynamic, bold, unapologetic organization. An organization that refuses to accept the survival rates of abysmal 10%. It's literally like the worst cancer. And I say that because that's where I come from, but we've got to be bold and we've got to be out front with our messaging. And yeah, I'm thrilled to be part of a magical dream team of 13.
I have to say, we're also here at DWDC Canada, small but mighty. So
Right?
I sympathize entirely on the small team front. But thank you so much. Oh, yes, small but mighty, yes. And thank you so much for both telling me a little bit about your previous work and your passion. It's clear that both of you really love to connect with people. So thank you for that. All right. For our next question, and maybe we'll start with Amy this time, I ask, how does a cancer diagnosis impact the life of the patient and their loved ones?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one for us, given there's no screening or early detection for pancreatic cancer. It is most often diagnosed late. Where the cancer has already metastasized. So quite often people are presented with, you have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And as you can imagine, a patient and their loved ones are probably everything blocks out. They're in shock once they hear that, probably not absorbing a lot of what's said after that. And pancreatic cancer takes that to a whole new level, with half of those individuals dying within the first few months of diagnosis. So very much a sense of urgency and immediacy with a diagnosis like that. But as with other cancers, every part of your life is impacted, whether that be emotional, physical, financial, spiritual, and more. But I think there's just such a heaviness with the pancreatic cancer diagnosis that it almost causes you to face your mortality too, and that of your loved ones, and think, this is absolutely life-changing.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Scott, anything further to add, or your perspective again on how a cancer diagnosis impacts the life of the patient and their loved ones?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Amy shared it beautifully. So I'd like to echo a lot of what she said. But, one of my colleagues says it beautifully as well, too. She said, cancer doesn't just come in a little box and then you leave the hospital and cancer stays in that box. It affects absolutely everything. Again, emotionally, not only the one affected, but everyone that they love around them. Socially,
Yes.
you can feel extremely isolated for a variety of different reasons. And practically, finances come into it, real life comes into it, and often folks can't focus on themselves, sadly, until they focus on the practical side, until those things are in order. So there's a lot more beyond just the medical side that cancer affects for the patient and their loved ones.
Thank you so much for that. And I think your answers highlight why your organizations and the services and programs you offer are so important, because we only talked about sort of one aspect of it, the medicinal part, the practical part, but certainly the other aspects that it impacts as well for the patient and their family kind of makes these programs very necessary. So stay tuned for that. We've got questions for that upcoming. For my next question, and we'll start with Scott this time, I'd like to ask, what do you wish more people knew about supports available for those with a diagnosis?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked this often and we're shared often what people wanted to know more about. Awareness. Awareness is huge. It's ongoing. It's maintenance. It's something we have to work on each and every day. Often people find us and they share, I wish I would have known about Wellspring sooner. And here at Wellspring, you'll find a wide range of programs, and these are purposely designed to help provide connection and belonging, to ease physical pain, emotional distress. They build strength and mobility, and to reduce fatigue, quite honestly, through a lot of our exercise programs. We also specialize in financial, workplace counseling, other cancer-related supports are also available. And it's important to know that, our programs are available across Canada, in our centers, both in Ontario and Alberta, but also online from coast to coast to coast. And we would really love, and our wish is that they know when people come to us that they're not alone, and we'll walk alongside them every step.
Beautifully said. Thank you. And Amy, same question. What do you wish more people knew about supports available for those with a diagnosis?
Yeah, again, Scott played beautifully into this question. I feel like it is also an awareness thing for us too, but I think it's just knowing that these services are available and they're for free. And to his point, they're available everywhere, right? And if there's one thing the pandemic gave us, it was the ability to go virtual and access services that you wouldn't have previously been able to access before. So yeah, I wish they knew about our free specialized pancreatic cancer support programs and counseling. We have an Ask an Expert service that people can access if they have questions, right? And it's a 2-day business turnaround that they can have those, those in between kind of doctor's appointments questions. And the other thing I want to mention that we've seen, at least I've seen in my almost a year in the portfolio, is the value of palliative care at the time of diagnosis. Too often palliative care is looked at as this simply end of life care, and it's just for your last few months, which really, no, it's not. It's a comprehensive interdisciplinary approach focused on the needs and the comfort of the patient and their loved ones. And I know Scott's nodding. Scott lived this, obviously, with his background, but the importance of that, and I don't know if that's shared widely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for both of those answers. And maybe just as a quick follow-up question about how you wish people maybe knew about your services before then. So maybe we'll start with that. Does somebody need to have a cancer diagnosis to ask questions about your organizations or ask questions about your services? I figued.
Oh, yeah,
We'll
like
start early.
Right. And I say that there's 13 people on the other end, but typically it's just me in programs, but we take all of the calls, we will triage and we will connect them. It's probably similar to Scott, to whatever service they need, right? If it's not us, could be Wellspring, could be somebody else. So yeah, no referral necessary.
Wonderful. All right. Okay, so for our next question, and I think we'll go with Amy this time. Amy, this is more of a general question about PCC at large now. Can you tell me a little bit about Pancreatic Cancer Canada's programs and services, including how somebody might enroll or if there are any costs associated? And I think you touched on that already, but maybe you can sum it up for us.
Yeah, so in terms of services, probably a vital part of our patient and caregiver support programs is the peer support, which I have touched on in partnership with Wellspring Cancer Support Foundation. We provide a specialized program for our patients and caregivers, and for anybody experiencing the pancreatic cancer experience, because it's so unique and it can be very rapid. We have peer support volunteers that are specially trained, that comfortable ear, that warm, non-judgmental environment, and to support patients and caregivers along their journey. They can also, through Wellspring, I think they can connect them to other programs and services that may be of interest, right? Depending on their needs. Maybe they like to sew, or maybe they like yoga or something of that nature for Wellspring. But in addition to that, we also provide an online pancreatic cancer support group that meets twice a month. So a little variety for whatever you're interested in. Some people like a different interaction. Another program we offer is our Ask an Expert program, which I briefly mentioned. And this program is an important resource for patients when they're first diagnosed, or those in between appointments, doctor's appointments, where you can't get a hold of anybody. This really empowers patients, caregivers, and families to make informed decisions about care, treatment options, and other concerns that arise from such a devastating to heavy diagnosis. So you can imagine, if you're curious about questions that we get through this program, it can range anywhere from like genetic counseling to nutrition information to clinical trials to you name it, second opinions. And this service is completely accessible and free online or by phone in Canada, anywhere. And I would say one other support we offer is through our social media. So our social media channels have created this beautiful community of support, allowing people to share their experiences and connect, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And when that happens kind of organically, it's pretty terrific.
Wonderful, fantastic. And you covered quite a lot, as I can imagine, trying to sum up all of your work in a couple of sentences. But I just wanted to also touch on, are there any programs or supports specifically for caregivers?
Yeah, so they are all available. Anything we offer to patients is available to caregivers as well, knowing the full impact of a cancer diagnosis. And Scott alluded to this earlier too, around how it just impacts everybody. And it's not in a box, right? That's, or unless you're like, it's open to everybody. As soon as that diagnosis happens, friends, family support rally. And so all those programs are also available to them as well.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And Scott, I'm going to pose the same question. Can you tell me a little bit about Wellspring Alberta's programs and services, including how somebody might enroll or if there are any costs associated?
Yeah, definitely. So Wellspring Alberta's programs and services are extensive. We offer over 70 programs that are completely free, without referral, led in evidence, and they're presented by paid professionals. Again, what we're not is medical. So we focus on programs that are educational, a lot of expressive art programs. That could be music, learning to play ukulele, digital storytelling, movement and meditation programs. So yoga for men, yoga online, Reiki, iRest meditation, to name a few. Practical programs, our Money Matters is huge. So think of all things paper related. If you need a hand with form completion, taxes, drug coverage, wills and estates, we'll walk alongside you every step of the way till you're comfortable with all the paperwork that comes with cancer. Self-care programs, and a lot, like as you mentioned before, especially just focusing for the caregiver. We have peer support both for those living with cancer and specific peer support just alone for those that are caregivers, because many have not been down that path before. We have an Indigenous Cancer Sharing Circle that we're very proud of, that we're learning and listening a lot from. So a lot of that falls under the self-care as well.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that was a very fulsome answer, so I don't have any follow-ups, so thank you for that. For our next question, and I'll maybe pose this to both of you, and either of you can jump in. But as it turns out, so Wellspring Cancer Support Foundation, which is kind of an affiliate of Wellspring Alberta, if you will, as well as Pancreatic Cancer Canada, they already work together to support those impacted by cancer. So either of you, if you could start and tell me a little bit more about how those organizations already collaborate.
Let me go, Scott.
Sure. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Yeah, so we have the prestigious honor of being the first national cancer partnership for Wellspring Cancer Support Foundation. We've been fortunate to have a partnership with them for over 5 years now to provide specialized pancreatic cancer support to our community. It really is a vital part of our programs and services. We have seen tremendous growth in that time, and we're expanding to include French support, peer support volunteers, and counselors. But even beyond the peer support program, we collaborate on educational webinars and are currently in the development stages of a new peer support specialty to provide emotional support to caregivers whose loved ones have elected to have medical assistance in dying. So a really unique kind of journey, and to be able to have that neat, like their own private space and environment to hush through that and figure that out.
Wow, that's fantastic. So I guess we'll stay tuned for that. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, we'll keep you in the loop. Time and dignity.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. We'll pass it on to our supporters. And Scott, I didn't know if you wanted anything else to add or if you feel Amy tied it up.
Well, I think Amy covered it, you know, all the high end parts, but like she said, we've been together since 2018, and it's a beautiful relationship. And we provide programming and support for not only those with pancreatic cancer, but just as importantly, the families. So in collaboration with one another, supporting everyone involved in that, which is vitally important. You have to be inclusive of everyone that's involved in that journey. And to her point, the partnership includes peer support, and there's a support group for educational resources as well, and for patients and caregivers. And we can find referrals beyond if we need to, if it goes beyond what we can do together.
Absolutely. So really staying with them a whole step of the way, every step of the way.
Yep.
Wonderful. All right. So for my next question, I think that goes with anything, especially for Pancreatic Cancer Canada. When we talk about a cancer diagnosis, I think the concept of death or the inevitability of death is perhaps a bit more immediate for those with a diagnosis or those impacted by cancer. And so I want to talk a little bit about grief. And I think that's something that certainly both of you have experienced within just staff members when you work with somebody that then dies, or work with the grief of somebody who's died and then has family members that survived or loved ones that survive. But I want to ask, maybe we'll start with Scott this time. What is your organization's approach to grief in those that are impacted by cancer?
No, great question. And we're firm believers in this needs to be normalized. You know, often grief can be taboo. It can be difficult for a lot of folks, but we're here. And most importantly, we're going to listen and listen and listen a little more. We learn a lot by that. The communication's key. So we provide ongoing supports and programs through our public programs as well. We have speaker series that we have experts that come in and talk about grief and bereavement. We have transition support coaches. So for those real difficult times that someone needs to speak to someone, and they'll often meet with them, provide a grief assessment, and then referral services if necessary. We have an extensive list of community and provincial organizations that specialize in grief counseling. And often sometimes people find, well, you know, through Wellspring Cancer Support Foundation, they find us after they've lost someone. So they are bereaved. And they can become a member with us at that point. They can join us through wellspring.ca and to access your bereavement support groups there, also peer support through there. And there's 3 bereavement options for support groups through Wellspring Cancer Support Foundation. So that would include a group for spouses, immediate partners, also a group for loss of immediate family or someone very, very close to you. Family means different things to different people, so it doesn't have to be blood. And then coming up very soon, there's going to be a support group for those going through medical assistance and dying. We're looking at that coming up in November-ish. And that is in collaboration with PCC right here. And it's important to note that it's sponsored through Pancreatic Cancer Canada.
Thank you so much for that. And before I pose that question to Amy, I'd just like to ask that follow-up that I have. Do you have any lessons learned about how people experience grief, or if any of those have changed the way you provide your programs and services, or perhaps a memorable story about grief?
Sorry, is that follow-up for Scott?
That's the follow-up for Scott. Sorry, maybe I've voiced that wrong. Yes, sorry. Post for Scott. Yes. So maybe I'll repeat the question, Scott. Do you have any lessons learned about how people experience grief, or has that changed the way that you provide your programs and services?
What we noticed is that each path is unique, but they're quite similar. And it's best to listen and, you know, meet them where they're at, come in without judgment. And really listen again, focus on what their needs and energy are at that time and their interest, and then focus on their time and energy, I should say. But by really listening and focusing on those things, then we can often refer or share things that someone may find beneficial. But we do definitely have the resources and we have the support. So that's the most important part.
I agree. Thank you. All right, Amy, for my first question. So, what is your organization's approach to grief and those impacted by pancreatic cancer?
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you spoke of pancreatic cancer, and for some people, it's seen as a death sentence. And so it behooves us as an organization to be comfortable in the space of talking about death, dying, and grief when the cancer our patients face has a mortality rate of 90%. Our approach to grief with those impacted by cancer is to meet them where they're at, where they're grieving, and connect them to the supports they need at that time. But I am excited to share that we're currently in the process of building out a palliative and end-of-life care focused strategy for 2024. And collaborating with organizations such as Enwell and Dying with Dignity will bring more tangible resources to our community in this area. We'll also be looking to augment actually our Ask an Expert program by offering an expert to address death and dying related questions with our community. We are putting strategic attention toward talking about death and dying in a meaningful and a very public way. We're getting out there. We've got worse cancer, we're getting out there. So another way we're actually addressing grief, and Scott spoke to this a little bit, is through peer support partnership, which includes a bereavement component where individuals can connect with other individuals who've lost someone they loved to pancreatic cancer.
Thank you for that. And I think something really lovely just to tie in for what you had mentioned, Scott, is that it's so valuable that those who have already lost someone to that diagnosis, to cancer, can actually go and still access your resources. So it's not just about those before that are experiencing, or those who are impacted, that they can come afterwards. So that support is available even after they've lost someone. So I think that's wonderful. So thank you both for your answers. All right. So for my next question, and we'll start with Amy this time. How does community-based and peer support programs round out the care that's provided to those impacted by cancer?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of value in being able to share with somebody who's been there, similar to what we just spoke about. Our peer support programs facilitate a connection with individuals who've had similar experiences, so they can relate to the journey. A pancreatic cancer diagnosis presents its own unique challenges, with typically late-stage diagnosis and then a very rapid progression. So having someone to talk to that's maybe outside of your friend or family group is very valuable, that you can share your fears, maybe, and what you talk about dying. Maybe you don't feel like you're in a place to talk to your family yet about dying. So I think too, it's worth noting with pancreatic cancer that the grief can be very compounded with trauma because it happens so quickly. So I think it's just worth noting that probably for us, they can experience, somebody that's lost someone to pancreatic cancer, that grief can be just as intense, like 3 years down the line after they've lost someone. So just noting it's a very traumatic experience. We're very fortunate too that Wellspring offers the OASIS program, which is an advanced cancer support program too. Again, another place where it's an unstructured environment, but they can share openly about, wow, this really sucks about this part, and I really want to dig into these feelings, in a place where it's not necessarily family and friends. It's just a different environment where the people can really relate to where you're coming from.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Scott, exact same question posed to you. If there's anything else you want to add, how does community-based and peer support programs round out the care that's provided to those impacted by cancer?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for touching on the OASIS program, Amy. That's very important. And I just wanted to touch on anticipatory grief is a very real thing, and especially with pancreatic cancer. So you don't have to wait till after someone passes to be experiencing grief, and it's important that we acknowledge that. But with our peer support programs, it's invaluable. We offer peer support specifically for individuals with cancer, as well as I mentioned earlier, for caregivers. Our peer support teams, our volunteers, are extremely well vetted. They're trained extremely well on empathy, on emotional intelligence. They learn to, and they practice this. They practice to catch folks when they listen to them. And then respectfully, I mean, we get a lot of advice from family and friends. Although well-intentioned, we get a lot of shoulds. And should comes with, it comes with pressure, and it feels like judgment. So we respectfully don't take that approach. We listen, we empathize, and then we'll coach. We'll share what someone may find, beneficial for them or for their loved ones. And we'll focus again, you've heard me say it before, but we'll focus on our members' their needs and what their interests are, and again, on their time and energy. And that's where we'll focus on most. And they know they have a safe person that they can connect with regularly that's been down that path, that has a shared life experience.
Thank you so much. And I think it's safe to say that, barring the actual individuals that are members of the peer support program, that it's still confidential. So if somebody wants to kind of keep things private, they can do so with the program and feel, safe and concerned. Thank you so much for that. And actually, just before we move on to the next question, Scott, I did just want to ask a follow-up question. If you could maybe expand a bit more on what the Oasis program offers and what it does.
Well, respectfully, I may let Amy share that a little bit, because that's based out of Wellspring Cancer Support Foundation.
Oh, my apologies. Sorry, Amy.
Toronto. No problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so my knowledge of the program, I just know our folks have definitely accessed it, it's led by seasoned healthcare professionals that have a lot of experience in dealing with patients who have advanced cancer. Very unstructured environment, and to the point of just almost like a networking, sharing, open, because sometimes structure can hinder things, when you get in a room and, okay, this will fall this way, you can walk in and then share openly with folks. I think it's just more of a space to be that with other folks that are going through something similar. It may not be the same cancer, but it's still advanced cancer, which you're facing similar challenges, I can imagine.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to, we can send details after the webinar too, if people want information on programs.
Wonderful. So if anybody wants any of that information, please follow up with us at support@dyingwithdignity.ca, or reach out to us through social media or any way you feel appropriate, and we can definitely pass that information on. So thank you for that, Amy. All right. So for next question, and I'll pose it to Scott this time, I'd like to ask, have you noticed any similarities when it comes to the needs of those affected by cancer? What's the journey like for people? And I think you touched a little bit on how it impacts everyone, not just the diagnosed, but any similarities you think in their journey?
There's many similarities, but ultimately it's pretty simple when you think about it. There's many similarities, but it's often folks want to be heard. They want your attention, your undivided attention. They want to be heard. They want to share what they're going through, and they're looking for folks that can meet them there. They don't want to be judged. Again, they want to be accepted and met where they're at. And for many, even though many of the journeys are similar, of course, each one is unique, but there's a lot of similarities. But we ensure that each journey that again, it goes back to what Wellspring always says, that no one has to face cancer alone. And then we'll meet them where they're at, and then we'll support them, we'll walk alongside them, and offer a lot of things that we hope they'll find beneficial.
Thank you. Amy, same question.
Yeah, so similar, I think we recognize that everyone has their own unique cancer journey, but with pancreatic cancer in particular, the unfortunate reality and similarity is that the journey can be short and traumatic for patients and loved ones. Some of the initial needs, and similar to what Scott was saying, come in the form of want to be heard or have questions. So ours typically will be around nutritional support, right? It's the pancreas that plays a role in digestion, or second opinions. I'm not sure if this is really, do I have pancreatic cancer? Can I get a second opinion? Or treatment options. They're saying I'm not a candidate for surgery. What does my chemo look like? So we're really fortunate that our Ask an Expert program plays a critical role in responding to those questions in a quick turnaround. But other needs come in the form of emotional support. And again, similar to what Scott was saying about just being heard, right? And somebody to walk through that, all the steps of that journey with you is invaluable for patients and caregivers. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So we are actually wrapped up for our interview questions here. So that time went very quickly, and everybody gave very lovely summarized answers. So we're actually going to move on to our audience Q&A. And thank you so much to everybody that's been submitting their questions. Please keep them coming. For my first question, and this is more posed to Amy, so I'll have you answer. This audience member would like to ask, what progress is being made by the various teams across Canada that are researching pancreatic cancer?
My diplomatic answer, not enough. No. Doing our very best, and this is a great opportunity to share kind of what our mission is. And we very much live in this duality where we invest in the best and most cutting edge research we can in buckets of treatment, early detection. We know early detection is the holy grail of pancreatic cancer, right? Because right now you can't detect it. But we invest in all of that research, but at the same time, we're supporting all the 90% of folks who unfortunately won't make it. But there is progress happening. Research is a long game, but we are investing. It is definitely a priority of our organization. And we're looking at it from the perspective of ensuring that we've got all of our areas covered. So it is early detection, treatment options, and for caregivers and patients, what does that look like? What does that journey look like? So we're looking at novel approaches, potentially even. I know psilocybin's been thrown out there in terms of not even just anxiety, but also for pain related to cancer. So we are definitely exploring, and no stone left unturned. We are very open to novel research, and again, just the most cutting edge research. We've seen very slow progression in the survival rates to that person's question. It's not enough, but we're doing our very best to push, and this is the right organization for it, and you got the right CEO.
All right, good to hear it. Thank you for that question for audience member. And I'm going to ask a similar follow-up question for Scott. So this audience member is going to ask, are you aware of any other types of cancer research or progress being made regarding treatments or cures, Scott?
That's a great question. I would have to research it a bit. Again, I'm not in the medical field at this time. Wellspring, Alberta is not medical. There's a lot going on. What I can speak to in Alberta, we're very fortunate. We have the largest cancer care center that is due to open very soon, just here at Foothills in Northwest Calgary, the Calgary Cancer Center. So there's a lot of research and a lot of time and effort going into this. It's a massive facility that's going to change the landscape of care within Southern Alberta and within actually Western Canada for that matter. So there's a lot of, I'll echo what Amy said, there's a lot of research. It is the long game that's going into it. What I can share now, cancer, if you heard that word with a diagnosis in the 80s, for the broad spectrum of cancers, it was very, a lot of people felt like it was a death sentence, to be quite frank, right away. It's not that way anymore with a lot of cancers. A lot of cancers, you may be living with a cancer that may never go away, so a chronic cancer, but you may be living with that for the rest of your life, and that may not be the mortality that takes you. It could be something else. So there is a lot of progress definitely coming. But again, that would be better asked for, again, we are a foundation that we don't focus on the medical side, we focus on all the other aspects that come with cancer.
Right. Thank you for that answer and for that distinction. All right. So for next question, let's see here. All right. So I'll pose this one to Scott, actually, as a follow-up. So Scott, you mentioned a group for those experiencing MAID. And this audience member asks, do PCC and or Wellspring provide information to their clients about MAID? So I know that there's an upcoming program coming up with peer support for those that are, again, considering or pursuing MAID. But in general, maybe we'll start with Wellspring Alberta. Does Wellspring Alberta offer any information on MAID, or do you interact with those that might be considering or pursuing MAID?
So we get asked about that, definitely, for sure. Again, we do not advise one way or the other. It's out of our scope of practice. It's best to discuss with your care team, medical professionals, experts in that field. Having said that, Wellspring has an amazing program called our speaker series that's often open to the public. These are where we bring in experts that's in their field. And we've had an expert in the field that practices MAID here in Alberta and at the Tom Baker Cancer Center. And we'll bring him in for a speaker series. And he will speak objectively about MAID, which means he's removing his feelings and emotions and just sharing the facts. And the great thing about the speaker series is you can join one of these sessions, listen, and then you can speak to the expert right after, almost identical to the program that we're having today, where they'll share the facts and they'll go through. We can definitely share forms or information, but we will not advise one way or the other, because it's it should be an individual decision based by yourself and the care team and your loved ones around you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'll pose kind of the same question to you, Amy, of do you offer information, or have you ever supported somebody that's considered or requested MAID?
Yeah, certainly we've had people that have reached out, patients and families that have reached out about the process, and we know the exact right people to send them to. So typically we send them right over to Dying with Dignity. We're not the experts in the area, but we're definitely happy to facilitate those connections with folks so they know all of their options.
All right. Thank you for that. And thanks to our audience member for submitting that question. And this one's for you, Amy. This audience member asked, so you had mentioned previously the importance of palliative care being started early and some of the myths that exist about palliative care. And this audience member asks, are there any other myths about palliative care that you, or and they also posed this to Scott, that you would like to dispel, or anything else maybe that you find important to share?
Yeah, I would say that palliative's gotten a bad rap, man. Like it's one of those things that's really beautiful, and it's meant to care for somebody that if they have a life-limiting illness, it doesn't even have to be with their end of life is in the last few months of care. Palliative, you could live for 6 years, 6 months. Right? It's meant to be focused on the needs of the patient and the caregiver, and really focused in on that. And I think the biggest myth is just around the definition, and it's really just to make folks comfortable. It doesn't necessarily define end of life, right? It's comfort and making every day the best day it can be.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Scott, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else.
Amy took the words out of my mouth. I mean, there's a lot of ignorance. I don't mean rude, but lack of knowledge around
Fair.
palliative care. Palliative care happens at home. Palliative care happens in the community. It can happen for years. It's about keeping comfortable and managing those chronic conditions or the chronic symptoms. But it's, in my opinion, it's been taboo for a long time. We need to normalize end of life, normalize talking about palliative care. It is a beautiful thing that's all encompassing beyond just medication. It's so much more.
Right.
And Amy said it beautifully.
All right. Thank you both so much for that. And thanks to our audience member. All right. Let's see here for our next question.
Great
This audience
questions.
member. Yes, yeah, I know. I give all full credit to our audience here, full credit. So this audience member just wants to ask a little bit more about how your organizations run. So they ask, how are these two organizations funded? And maybe we'll start first with Amy.
Sure, we are completely donor dollars. We have a team of 13, and it's completely the generosity of our community. A lot of people that have been impacted by pancreatic cancer will give to the organization because they want to see rates improve, and they don't want to see other family members go through the same thing. So either if they've loved the peer support, sometimes they'll give money to that, or if it's no, I want early detection because I don't want future generations to have to go through this. So yeah, it's completely donor dollars and we're very, very grateful. And for the Power 13, we definitely put every single penny to work. Yeah,
absolutely. It sounds like it from this interview. I have no disagreements. And the same thing for you, Scott, as well. How exactly is Wellspring Alberta funded?
Yeah, thank you. That's a fantastic question. We receive no core funding from the federal or provincial governments. So through our amazing resource development team, through resources, through fundraisers, relationships with organizations, individuals, a beautiful story recently of someone that wanted to leave money for Wellspring in their will. And in speaking with our team, they actually gifted that money while they were still alive so they could see the magic while they were still here, which I think is absolutely wonderful. But it's through the generous donations of our community and making awareness and sharing awareness. And that's how the money comes in. So we can ensure to provide these programs for all our members, including those living with cancer, their family, their caregivers. So it's done that way.
All right.
Well, too, Amanda, I should have added, we definitely get grants from pharma too, and as well from other corporate partners too. So I want to make sure I acknowledge all of the dollars we receive.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. Thanks to our audience member for asking that question. All right. So for a follow-up here, this audience member is asking a bit about how they can provide personal support themselves. As we've mentioned, it's not just the person themselves diagnosed with cancer that's impacted. And so they ask, what do I say to friends who tell me they've been diagnosed with cancer? I know I need to listen, but what can I say? I'm looking for some tips. And I'll let either one of you jump in.
Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very common question. And what I would share, one, thank you for asking, because obviously you're taking it to heart and you want to know what to say. And the second thing I would share, it's okay to not have the answer to questions sometimes. It's okay to let them know, thank you for asking me that. I can see it's concerning for you. to empathize with them, to share what they're sharing with you, and just be present, and let them know that you'll be there. It's tough. We don't always have the answers, but letting them know that you hear how they're feeling and you can kind of paraphrase it back. You don't have to be a parrot, but, share what they're sharing with you, and let them know that, I may not have the answer right now, but I'm going to walk alongside you and we'll do this together. And sometimes the gift of a pause or a moment in time while you're thinking too. We're such a fast society nowadays. I need to have the answer. I need to know. It's okay not to know. And it's okay to let them know that you don't know, but that you're still there and that you're listening. I think that's the most important part, more so than having an answer to that exact question.
Thank you. And Amy, anything to add?
Yeah, I think Scott hit the nail on the head. I think, and you did earlier too, it's listen, and listen some more. It's just holding space for those people and connecting them, right, to services when they're ready, like arming them with, say, hey, they've expressed some interest in wanting to maybe reach out and to get some additional help, whether that's through peer support or counseling. Having that stuff maybe in your back pocket, but just hold the space, because there's a lot of value in that.
All right. Thank you so much for your answers. And thank you to our audience member for that wonderful question. All right. So next up, let's take a look here and keep them coming, everyone. Thank you so much. This audience member wants to ask a little bit about something that you had referenced previously, Amy. So they ask, you had mentioned that PCC is working towards an end of life strategy. What can we expect from PCC in the coming months and years? Maybe you can expand a bit on what you had talked about.
Yeah, it is still very much in development stages, I'll be very honest, but we are quite aware that 90% of our folks do not make it. So it's definitely important for us to wade into that territory. And I think a lot of that is collaborating with like-minded organizations such as Dying with Dignity and Endwell in the US. And it's really finding out, who's doing what really well. How do we lift that up and amplify that? Where are the opportunities for collaboration where we can just, again, normalize it, put the conversation out there, whether that's social media campaigns, whatever that looks like, but a real awareness push around having the conversation and around talking about end of life and how it's another natural phase of life, right? People often will say they're so excited about all the people are going to the hospital for the birth and there's so much excitement, but death, they're moving on to something else too, right? It's a natural progression. And hopefully you'll stay tuned because there's stuff to come. It's still being finalized, but definitely more resources to be shared for public to utilize. And stay tuned. Tune into our social channels. We'll do a lot of pushes through those routes, but also through partnerships with Dying with Dignity and with Endwell. So yeah, we're excited. So please reach out to me. I'm super accessible as this is rolling out. It's a 2024 strategy, but I don't mind giving some sneak peeks if folks are really interested once it starts to take more shape. But yeah, great question. Thank you.
All right. You heard it here, folks. Exclusive access upon request. And maybe I'll pose a similar question to Scott here. If there's any exciting projects or any interesting research that Wellspring wants to do themselves about new programs or services, anything that you wanted to highlight maybe?
Well, with Wellspring Alberta, we're very excited. We were very city focused before we became a provincial organization. So we were focused with Wellspring Calgary, Wellspring Edmonton. We're better together and we can reach more people provincially. So now we're a provincial organization, and part of our strategy going forward is our outreach. We have a team now that is focused on bringing in community connectors. So these are volunteers that live in Lethbridge, that live in Red Deer, that live in Wetaskiwin, Canmore, that live in Grand Prairie, right up near the border with the Northwest Territories. So we're building a strategy to support smaller communities, rural, Indigenous, remote communities, and where we don't helicopter in and say, hey, this is what works best. We come in, we introduce ourselves if we're invited, even better, and we listen. And with our community connectors, we focus on what the community needs and what they're asking for and the supports that they're looking for. And we're building beautiful relationships. We've opened up Cancer Connect meetings now in both Red Deer and Lethbridge, just this year alone. So we are growing, we're listening, and we're becoming that provincial voice and support that has been, needed for so long. So we're very excited about growing beyond just the big cities.
Absolutely, and it does sound exciting. I know that's always a bit of a struggle. I think with healthcare and with navigation is the urban center versus the rural centers. So it's wonderful to hear that you guys are expanding. So I guess again, just as I said with Amy, everybody stay tuned, and feel free to reach out to Wellspring, Alberta if you feel like you might not be in the right catchment. It sounds like they'll still be able to connect you. So thank you for that. For our next audience member question, and this is posed more to Scott. So this audience member would like to know if Wellspring provides any special supports or a type of program specifically for pediatric cancer families or for families that are supporting, a minor that has a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, that's a great question. We get that quite a bit. So our membership is open generally for those 18 and over. We try not to duplicate services, as things can get complicated in Alberta when you duplicate services. So we definitely do have children that partake in programs, some of our food and nutrition programs, art programs, where adults that are members can sign their children up as participants within these programs. But we have Kids Cancer Care or other similar like-minded organizations like that within the city and within the province that focus on individuals until they're 18. Having said that, we're not naive. Just this weekend alone, we had Kids Cancer Care had a conference, and that was for the families and the children at this amusement park. So the children took place during the day, while the adults had conferences and meetings. And we had a booth there because their parents can join as caregiving members or family members and enjoy all our services and supports, or benefit, I should say, from them. And then also building those connections for young adults. So maybe they are, 15, 16, 17, going to be in, 18 soon enough. So they build an awareness, we build a relationship so they know we can help transfer those services or programs when they become of age at 18. And it's important to know that we focus on young adult programs too. We have a variety of young adult programs, not specifically pediatric, but when you're transferring through, you're not going to be the 18-year-old, respectfully, that may be in a group session with folks that maybe you find them in their 70s or so. There's programs specifically for supporting our young adults that are 18 to 40. So you'll be amongst your peers where you can be supported by Wellspring. So we build that gap of awareness, and then we bridge them with their family. And then when they're of age, and even when they're below, they can participate in many programs.
All right, thank you for that, Scott. And maybe just if you could mention that organization one more time, specifically more for pediatric cases, just for the audience member who might want to research and follow up.
Yeah, Children's Cancer Care, Kids Cancer Care.
Kids Cancer Care. Okay, thank you for that. And thanks to our audience member for that question. All right, let's take a look. We have some time for a few more. This audience member would like to ask, can you speak a little bit about the lack of funding? And maybe you can speak first to what funding you do possess already, but can you speak a little bit about the lack of funding to organizations such as yours and how people can access physical and emotional support in a more accessible way? So maybe outside of virtual programs.
Sure, I'll go ahead.
I was going to say, Amy, if you'd like to jump in.
Yeah, so definitely a lack of funding, and part of that is due to we're still considered a rare cancer. So it doesn't get the attention like breast cancer and some of the other cancers get. So that part is unfortunate. Again, we are all in all the right groups to advocate for more research dollars and just more research in general for our topic area, right? Especially when it comes to finding out the mysteries of the disease, right? How can we screen for it? How can we detect for it earlier? And in terms of supports for individuals, anything is available. I know virtually may not be ideal for some folks. Any of our programs are available by phone as well. And in Ontario, there's Toronto locations have in-person programming, and I'm sure obviously in Alberta they do as well. Absolutely.
Anything else to jump in with there as well, Scott?
Lack of funding, I think a lot of time comes back to awareness. I mean, Wellspring, before we were Wellspring Alberta, Wellspring Calgary has existed since 2007 and Edmonton since 2017. So speaking provincially, we'll have folks that come through almost every day and they're like, I wish I'd known about you sooner. We are a nonprofit charity, so we're a small but mighty organization, much like yourselves. But awareness, like I said, is maintenance. It's constant. It's huge. And I spoke to the point of where our dollars come in. Unfortunately, they don't come from the federal or provincial government. So we're building these relationships with amazing organizations and individuals. And in terms of programs, we have options. So we really try and meet members where they're at. If they don't want to do online, we have 3 centers: Karma House, where I'm at, Randy Odell House is in the southeast of Calgary, and Edmonton House, of course, in Edmonton. We have programs off-site sometimes where folks could come in. So we have options if they wish not to do it online. And we meet people where they're at. We have many members that aren't tech savvy or aren't comfortable in that space. We'll do absolutely anything we can to assist them. We'll help them. We have all the patience in the world. And when folks aren't, our membership is online, wellspringalberta.ca or wellspring.ca. But if you're unable or you find that challenging, you will never get a bot or, AI. You ring us, you're going to get a person. We will help you every step of the way to complete these forms, and we'll be there with you.
All right.
It's funny you say that, Scott. The value of a voice on the other end of the phone is something that does not happen anymore. We get the same reaction when people call. We have reach out for Ask an Expert, and they're like, wait a minute, this is a person on the line. Exactly. And I'm using a telephone. I'm using an old telephone. That's right. You're seeing it here. Exactly. Yeah. So the value of a human voice goes a very long way. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. For our next question, and this is more linked towards you, Amy. This person is asking specifically about pancreatic cancer, and they'd like to ask, at what stage is pancreatic cancer usually detected? And I think you alluded to a little bit, but just in case you have another answer. And they'd like to ask, are there things that you can do to find out if you have it before it is in an advanced stage? So I think they're, again, just looking for any additional strategies or any more tips.
Those are the magical questions, aren't they? It's unfortunate. It's usually diagnosed quite late. I don't have the stats on what it's diagnosed at what stage, but definitely usually late. 3 is usually the earliest. We do hear every once in a while stage 2. In my less than a year here, I've only heard stage 2. I think somebody being diagnosed with that once. Typically it's stage 4. There are modifiable risk factors similar to probably any cancer, sedentary behavior, diet, nutrition, alcohol use, limiting alcohol use. But in terms of catching it sooner, there are options for genetic counseling if you have a family history. But that doesn't necessarily even indicate if you're going to have it or have the chance to get it, right? So it is connected to the BRCA gene. And there is a marker of CA19-9, but it's, again, that's not necessarily an indication that you're going to develop pancreatic cancer. So my unfortunate answer is there is really no additional screening at this time that's been proven effective. But I would say be persistent with your doctor. If you have low back pain, if you have things that you think are just going to be fluffed off to like, oh, gallbladder, be your own advocate, be persistent, get a second opinion if you need to. Because too often that's why it's diagnosed so late, is because the symptoms come across as relatively benign and everyday kind of symptoms, right? That, oh, I'm 46, I get back pain, it happens, right? But if this is something that's persistent, maybe reach out to your doctor and be your own advocate and be on top of it as much as you can be.
Thank you for that. All right, for our next audience member question, this was originally posed to Amy, but we'll ask both speakers because I think it's valuable. So we'll start first with Amy for this one. This audience member wants to know if PCC is linked with any other similar organizations internationally. Are there any international leaders in this field?
Yeah, we will connect with everybody and anybody. I think, and again, goes back to funding the best research and connecting individuals. Like if somebody reaches out from another country, I want to be able to connect them, even though my base is in Canada and kind of US. But absolutely, we're connected to a lot of hospitals in the US, and some Pancreatic Cancer UK we're connected to. There's global alliances for pancreatic cancer. We're on all of those, at all those tables to ensure we're hearing the latest and greatest so we can share it with our community. And so we can invest in the areas of greater interest for our community too.
All right, thank you for that. And Scott, I know that you just mentioned that your organization has gone from sort of more municipal sphere to provincial sphere. So I'm not certain if international ties have been made yet, but certainly if there's any international ambitions or ties that you'd like to make, the floor is yours as well.
So most importantly, we're affiliate with Wellspring Cancer Support Foundation, which is based in Toronto, GTA. So we are national, both locations in Alberta and Ontario. We have an amazing additional resource page. So for things beyond or what we don't provide on our webpage, so wellspringalberta.ca. Ignorantly, I don't believe we are, as a provincial organization, affiliated with anyone international. I'm not 100% sure with Wellspring Cancer Support Foundation in Ontario, so I don't want to say, so I just want to be transparent about that. We do get information or folks trying to share their resources with us from the States quite a bit, but we want to extremely, we want to do our due diligence. Anyone that ends up on, or any organization that's on our additional resource page, we want to make sure that they kind of follow our values. And so if at all possible, we want it to incur no cost, which a lot of folks or organizations that come from the States unfortunately do. So we don't put that on our additional resource page, but at this time we're national, and we have a lot of provincial and of course, city resources as well too, but we stay mainly within Canada.
All right, thank you so much for that. And thanks to our audience member for that question. Okay, let's see here. We've got just a few more before we wrap up. This audience member actually is asking you directly, Scott, about your speaker series from Wellspring, Alberta. They wanted to ask, are they online, or if there are any recordings present on the website so they can revisit if they're not available for the live session?
Yeah, no, great question. Thank you for that. So they are available online, so wellspringalberta.ca. And you can look at the public programs, and you'll find them that way through the speaker series, or upcoming programs through the speaker series. If any issue, please connect with us and we'll help you register for that. We'd be more than happy. And sorry, what was the second part of that?
I think they were just making sure that if they're not available at the
right,
actual live
yeah.
session, that it's available on the website. So
I would say we don't put past recordings on our website. Some of them they are. I would say the majority aren't. And the reason is a lot of these are open to our members, or the speaker series. It could be a membership program beyond just the public one. And with that comes confidentiality, or things that are shared within those. And in those Zoom recordings, often our members, a little different from here, can share their video, can share their voice, those things where we don't have. We find it safer not to share that and keep people in a safe space, because then they're apt to ask more questions and be more open. So we often, not always are they shared, is the honest answer. And if they are, we don't put them on our website. Someone would ask, and then if it was doable, then we would share.
all right. Thank you so much for that. It sounds more like it's just limitations of the forum, and that there's sort of pros and cons to sharing and recording. So I think that makes sense based off of that. But I'm sure they could still reach out if they have any questions or need help registering, right?
Yeah,
so
always.
wonderful. All right. Let's see. This was already answered at the beginning, so I think we'll skip that question, but thank you so much to our audience member for that one. For our final question here, so Amy, this is a question posed to you about pancreatic cancer. Or actually, no, sorry, this, maybe rephrase that. Actually, this question is posed to both. My apologies. So this audience member asks, so Amy had originally spoken about a survival rate of about 10% for those with pancreatic cancer. And the audience member asks, are there any commonalities that Amy or Scott have observed when it comes to those who are near the end of their life? And so I think we've talked a little bit about the broad journey, and certainly with pancreatic cancer, that journey can be quite short, unfortunately. But maybe any final observations on those who are at their end of life stage, and if there's anything that's really common.
Yeah, I can hop in. I think it's tough because it is a unique experience, and because it is fast typically with our community, but there does typically seem to be a digestion period where they're kind of processing the diagnosis, and then there's a realization once treatment stops working. And it's kind of a beautiful thing when you see that transformation in that person say, okay, it's almost like I'm now just going to embrace and be as present as I can in the moments coming forward, and whatever joy it brings me. I've seen that with a couple different members of our community, and it's a pretty beautiful thing to witness, albeit I'm sure very tough to put that face on and get ready for that day. But I think a lot of that is a tribute to having the best supports, right? Having programs through Wellspring, that peer support program, a warm family support network. But definitely similarities and commonalities would be around, there's definitely phases. It's almost like there's almost like stages of grief. And then there's just acceptance at the end.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
well said, Amy. I would echo a lot of that. Again, the word taboo comes up. I'm a big believer in normalizing things. I mean,
Yeah.
up until 50, 60 years ago, people brought into Earth at home and left Earth at
Right.
home.
Right.
It's been so taboo now, just the way that we deal with death, unfortunately. But you know, being clear is kind, sharing the facts,
Yeah.
and not sugarcoating, but you know, being sincere and empathetic, but being very clear is kind. And yeah, so just sharing that and offering dignity to people. I mean, it's right in the title of your organization. But dignity,
Well played, Scott.
no, it's huge. So treating people with the respect that they deserve, not only the one that's passing, but the family. And it doesn't end there. The relationship is ongoing. And knowing that that relationship will always be there before, during, and after, you know, it's something that people can count on.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Scott and Amy. We are officially out of time for today. Thank you so much for joining our panel, for joining this session. Thank you to our audience members for submitting your questions and for staying with us today. Webinars like this one and all of our other compassionate services are provided free of charge to Canadians navigating end of life, their loved ones, and their healthcare providers. And to enable us to continue providing these services, we ask that you please consider making a charitable donation, and we'll put the link in the chat for anybody else who would consider donating. And once again, thank you so much to our panel. Thank you to our audience members. We do have another webinar tomorrow. It's on your healthcare team, community paramedicine specifically. We'll be joined by the wonderful Amber Hultink and DWDC volunteer and paramedic, Heather Quinn, and that will be tomorrow. So that's Wednesday, September 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So if you haven't registered yet, please consider doing so. And for those who are registered, we'll see you tomorrow. And thanks again to everybody for joining us. And I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Bye-bye, everyone.